Welcome to another episode of the Marketing Minute on the Pregnancy Help Podcast. I'm Delaney, the manager of Extend Web Services, and I'm glad you're here. Today, I'm joined by Extend team members, website specialist Monet, customer support specialist Cindy, and social media and design specialist Morgan, as we talk through something every pregnancy help organization faces: the small, everyday mistakes that interrupt your marketing without warning. We're talking about the tiny oversights that quietly break visibility, disrupt client pathways, and weaken donor trust. In this episode, we'll walk through the most common culprits and the simple fixes that keep your marketing running smoothly. Specifically, we're going to talk through marketing disruptions connected to losing access, losing people, losing sight of your message, and losing client touchpoints. Let's get started. Okay, we're just going to hit the ground running with something that we have discussed in the past, kind of give you guys some familiar ground to tread on, and that is social media access. Now, Morgan, you have quite a bit to say on this topic because you've walked with many pregnancy help organizations who have had some issues with their social media access. Can you speak to it a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like Delaney said, there have been a lot of times where we see either new clients coming to us and they just can't remember or can't find their login information. Um, and it's really hard because that means that we can't connect their accounts to our platforms, which means we can't post smoothly or really get their accounts connected at all. And so we see a lot of times where there's either turnover or someone new taking over social media, and they just have been logged in for so long that when they get logged out or when they have to upload their account into a platform, they either don't know their information or the person who was in their spot before doesn't leave it for anyone. And so
Right.
it causes some really big issues because when you can't post on your accounts, that means you're not getting your content out there, you're not getting your information out there, and so you lose that visibility. And so the big pain for it, I will say, is just staff leaving without passwords, or you only have one admin on your account, or you're using a personal email instead of a work email. So things that can't be shared easily. And when that happens, things just kind of go away or get lost. And so it's really, really important for people in these pregnancy help organizations to either have a password manager or somewhere safe that they can have all of their login credentials so that when there is that turnover, it's not just lost into the abyss. They have somewhere someone who knows how to get into your platforms, how to either go in and post manually, or if you're using an outsourcing service, that you can actually get your accounts logged in or loaded in to a platform. It's really, really important that you don't lose that information because that could set you back a long time. And I will say that a few social media platforms are not easy, not easy
Right.
if you don't have that information. So when you lose that, it takes a little bit of time and it gives a lot of headaches trying to figure it out because they're very secure, rightfully so, but it does cause a lot of issues. So we really, really want to push, just make sure you have a password manager, or at least someone that is in charge of keeping those so that when they leave or pass it on to the next, there is an actual written account of what your login information is.
Yeah. Can you guys tell that Morgan feels very passionate about this? She has walked with a number of pregnancy help organizations through this process.
Yes.
Morgan, something that we touched on in a recent blog was, I think, just a simple way to make sure there is a clean pass off. If I'm remembering correctly, the blog said to make sure that before a person leaves, like say it's like a week or so before the end of their time with the organization, that like a week before the end, they pass off, sign over the accounts, make sure that everything's firmly in the other person's hands instead of waiting until the last day, like just making sure there's a bulk time there? Because I've seen that, like, you always think you're going to have time for it. And then there's a lot to do when somebody is transitioning out of an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you can give yourself at least a week to transfer all that information over, that would be the best, just because then hopefully you can, whoever's stepping into that role can attempt and log in and make sure everything is updated and works. And if it's not, that means you still have a week to figure it out with the person who originally had the information.
Okay. And I know another area that has caused some pain and stress, at least during the time that I've been at Extend, is pregnancy help organizations and their domains. Thankfully, I don't have to be the one to talk about this. I'm not usually the one that's solving the problem. So I'm going to kick it over to Monet. Monet, what can you tell me about website and domain access?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. As Morgan was talking, I'm like, wow, okay, we a lot of these things that we're going to talk about today, I was thinking that it was going to be very customer focused or even PHO focused, as far as things that have happened through our experience, whether it was in a center or something like that, or Morgan's experience with social media. But this is like so overarching. I think I have locked myself out of probably five face, no, actually two Facebooks, most definitely. And so all of her tips, I'm like, yep, they not only carry over to the website and probably a lot of the topics we're going to talk about today, but then yeah, absolutely. So same thing with the website and your domain access. I think the one that I want to take just a quick second to talk about is more when it comes to your domain. So that is, as far as domain goes, that's going to be your website address. You're focused on having what it looks like, your website. Okay, you purchase that, making sure that you have either someone on staff that is really comfortable with managing that domain for you. I mean, we use GoDaddy, Squarespace, if that's just kind of ringing a bell. Um, if you don't have someone who is comfortable and aware with what things like DNS records look like, I would really encourage you to find someone. I mean, in our case, maybe it's someone who's hosting your website or your marketing services. They can do that for you. Usually it's pretty inexpensive. And when you have someone comfortable, someone who is, going to be able to take care of that domain long term.
Yeah.
We've seen big time, whether it's lapses in that domain, so they forgot to renew it. They didn't realize that was their responsibility to do that, whether it's annually, every 3 years, something like that. And then all of a sudden, I mean, we've experienced that where someone loses a domain and they've been established for 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
And then the day it lapses, someone else purchases it and it's gone. And that's going to affect your SEO. That's going to affect everything, all the materials you may have purchased for fundraisers, things like that, even DNS records. And that sounds like, I think it would sound like gibberish, if you don't know what I'm talking about, but it's basically like an instruction manual for your domain and where it's being sent and things like that. And so that's working with your email addresses. That's working with the security of your website and your email addresses and verifying that, hey, you're not getting sent to the spam box or your domain in general. And if that's not being managed well or correctly, I've seen some that are just really cluttered and they have things from old websites that maybe they'd used a different company. Those get out of hand. That's so overwhelming. And when someone doesn't understand something and then they walk into an overwhelming situation, you don't need that on your plate. So make sure to have someone who is capable and comfortable managing your domain, and then follow every one of Morgan's steps that she said above, because the passwords are definitely going to be very important. And getting locked out of those types of accounts is an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I will say that whoever is taking point of your domains, just make sure, even if it's set on recurring, that you keep an eye out for the emails that might be coming through that say, hey, your credit card is going to expire. It's a terror, which honestly brings me to our next point, which is email breakdown points. And I think Cindy and Monet both have things they can share about this topic. But just if you have that person, they're getting those recurring emails about domains or any other topic, but suddenly they leave or their emails get disrupted, your service is going to get disrupted. And it can cause issues in other places too. Right, ladies?
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'll bounce it over to Cindy in a second. But yeah, I mean, it's it's kind of goes hand in hand. Honestly, when I was even talking about domains, your email is looped directly inside of that. And if someone like say your emails get out of hand, whether it's hacked or you're sending emails that aren't message focused and they're not super important, you could start getting sent to a spam box, or someone could start sending you to spam, and then all of a sudden your authority in the emails you send, they're going to be pretty much tanked as well. So I stand by that. I think they go really hand in hand. I won't over talk on the topic because whatever I just said about the domains, it really just goes straight over to the emails as well. Cindy, I think you have a lot to talk about with this.
Yeah. One of the things that, we've seen is specifically like with contact forms going to emails that aren't managed anymore, or, like we've talked about earlier, getting locked out and then not having access to them and things like that. But I guess the biggest thing would be like how to avoid that. And for me, it's kind of keeping a hand on streamlining things as far as emails go, making sure you know who has access, maybe cross access, forwarding emails to like multiple people so that way nothing gets missed, especially with contact forms and you know people reaching out through your website. You don't want to miss those important things. Um, because if those things are missed, then you have people feeling like they're being ignored or forgotten, and that can really deteriorate relationships and things like that, or not start off client relationships on the best footing. So yeah, I would just suggest kind of to avoid that, to streamline it. Keep an eye on how many emails you have active, who has access to those, and things like that.
Yeah, that is totally true. It's crazy when we do an episode like this, you really get to look at all the different details, and it can get be a little overwhelming because repeatedly what we're going to be saying is just making sure that you know really where the access is, who has the passwords, who has the information. And that's no different for this next one, which is your donation page, your payment access, the way that donors are supporting your mission, making sure that you don't have broken links, that when you change your donation platform, you now have that information on your website or in any applicable place, whether that is a brochure that has a QR code or a text to give link, making sure everything is updated. That's honestly a really good thing to do. Anytime you make a switch, is just a little checklist of, okay, I'm making this switch. Where are all the places that it's going to hit? I think that Cindy, you have experienced a little bit of confusion when it comes to maybe not updating links. Am I anywhere close to it?
Yeah, definitely have personal experience in this, very recent personal experience I work with a nonprofit maternity home, and we have our big fundraiser in the spring, and we try, like we've mentioned multiple times, and like we're going to keep mentioning all of these best practices to avoid some of these issues. Um, we definitely missed that when it came to payment access because um, we have two giving gateways that we were working with. One of them was more of like a donor management, and the other one was more of like a fundraising platform. And somehow we had either an old QR code, an old link, or something. So throughout our fundraiser, we're expecting donations to come in on this one platform, and we're getting some random ones coming in on this other one that we thought was not even, you know, out there anymore. And we were just so thrown off. We went into full investigative mode trying to figure out where this page is at, what QR code is linking to this page, and just all the things. And it came down to just a lack of communication and organization when it came to those giving gateways. Um, and we had failed. I think it ended up being a QR code or something on an old information card that we just kind of pulled without checking and making sure that it was going to the right place. And so it was a great reminder to us that every so often, every quarter, whatever, to have kind of a rhythm of like
checking in and making
Mm-hmm.
sure like our QR codes are linking to the right, donation pages, any links that are out there are updated and things like that. So, yeah, it was a little bit of a crazy time until we got that all sorted out, but it was a great reminder that it's so important to minimize confusion on the back end, like for staff and board members, and also not to confuse potential donors who are like, this doesn't look like where I normally donate, or this doesn't say the directions that they were giving me. If it's confusing on the front end about where to give and how to give, that's just definitely not setting you up for success and a good trustworthy relationship. So
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
I was gonna say, can I ask you, so would you say like, do you have a suggestion moving forward for like best practice? Should that, you know, PHO should have maybe one giving gateway versus two? How did you guys move forward after that? Did you keep maybe better management of both in different locations, whether PayPal or GiveButter or Give Better, but or how did how did that work for you guys moving forward? What would you suggest?
So again, it kind of comes down to streamlining it. I think we kind of had to take a step back and look because both platforms were fantastic. One of them was more, like I said, for donor management, and the other one was a little bit more geared towards fundraising. And so we had to look back and both of them cost us money. So we're putting money into these platforms, and so we had to look at it and see what are we going to utilize the most, what has the features that we're going to use more often, and can we do, can we meet this need with this platform and vice versa? Because at the end of the day, the confusion would be less if we just had one giving gateway that we were working with, because then we'd never had to be like, okay, should we go with this one? Should we share this link? And then there was no issue of donors potentially being confused. So my suggestion would be to narrow down which platform is going to work best for what you're needing it for. If you're fundraising hardcore all year long, then you want to use some, maybe something more fundraiser focused. But um, if your main push month to month is going to be monthly donors and donor relationships, then maybe something that supports that more. So yeah, I would think that you would want to hone in on one specific one, and then you don't have to worry about any weird crossing of links.
So we have looked at the different access points, like what happens when you lose access. And Morgan touched on this originally when we started talking about social media, but now we're really going to dive into what does it look like or what is the impact on marketing when you lose people? And I think our friend Cindy is going to help me with this one, but
Yep.
really just the issues that come from one person being in charge of something. And we have touched on it, but we're going to go a little deeper here. I know that I came on at the end of December 24 as a manager of Extend. And one of the things I was very appreciative of is we had some really good documents in place about the different um, procedures, the different things to do. So if suddenly something did happen to, at that point, our customer support specialist, Jennifer, I would have some idea of what needed to be done. So it's just made me like very thankful for having good policies and procedures and documentation in place.
Yeah, I agree. And being on both parts of it, someone that has transitioned into a new role, like my new role with Extend, and seeing how that was set up, for my success coming into it. And then also on the other side, being on a board that's in transition now of
Mhm.
one or two people leaving and things like that. I feel like going forward, it's always going to have me encouraging like organizations to think about how to avoid that single person dependency. And when only one person knows how to do like a super critical,
Mhm.
important task, the entire organization kind of becomes vulnerable because you have
Oh,
one
yeah.
person that only has that important information. Whether that's someone that's out sick or on vacation or leaves unexpectedly, everything can kind of come to a halt. And it can also make the person that's needing to step out for whatever it may be, kind of laden with guilt because you've left it, kind of in a scramble. So building in some cross training, some shared responsibilities, I think is really important.
Mhm.
Um, but the biggest thing is making sure that processes are documented and that knowledge is shared kind of across the board or at least more than one person. So clear
Sure.
procedures, shared access to emails and accounts, as Morgan and Monet have said before, um, communication about what you're doing and how you're doing it. That clarity is just good regardless.
Yeah.
And you don't want that information to kind of live in just one person's head all the time, you know?
Sure. And I do like the having the documentation. Like I said,
Hmm.
was so integral for me in this position. But I also think there's something to be said about making sure you take time to allow people to shadow. So
Yeah.
I know everybody's got so much on their plates, but like you touched on, Cindy, when
Hmm.
somebody is out, whether it's because they're sick or because they're on vacation, there is a tendency for certain things to stall out. And there's some things that it's okay if it slows down, but other things that kind of are better if it kicks along. And we know it is important for people to take breaks. Like just even within the nonprofit realm, it's so easy for people to have burnout. Nonprofit's a little different because we typically are very mission oriented. And so we are carrying this with us long after we leave the office. It's not something where you clock in, do your job, leave, and hit other things. On some level, if you're part of a nonprofit, that mission is living with you. So
Yeah.
it's important to take breaks and to step away.
Yeah, I was thinking
Yeah.
too, honestly, it's even with the cross training piece, I think it's so great that you guys brought that up because if it's viewed too not so much as like a hassle of, oh, I have to now, I'm already so busy and I need to go and retrain someone else or teach someone else. At the same time, I've found that in probably every position I've been in where you don't really know something until you've taught it. And I think that it really is. There's no time other than when you're, whether it's shadowing. I've gotten so much stronger from being able to have healthy time pouring in what I have learned to someone else, in a way it's not eating all of my time, but it's just equipping the team. And as well as it's kind of, putting you into practice of having to think through not just be kind of get robotic in my processes because I do it all the time, but really being thoughtful of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. I do think it helps make the entire team stronger, even when we're super busy. So I just love that you guys brought that up.
And I know that there's something to be said about like, it is important to cross train, but as the person who is doing the training, there's like this ownership you have over the task. So, Morgan, if I suddenly toss somebody your way and was just like, hey, Morgan, this person needs to know everything there is about how we do social media at Extend, do you think it would be difficult on some level because you have so much responsibility for the task and the role? Like, what would that feel like to be like, okay, I need to make sure this person's doing this so that if I'm ever out, they are the backup or they can cover for me.
With social media, there are so many things that are so tedious
Uh-huh.
that I think like if it was last minute, like this person needs to be trained, I would probably freak out because there's just so much so much that you have to think through. But I do think like Mona said, I think there's something so beneficial about
Uh-huh.
that process of like maybe me training someone on social media will make me realize a better process or a simpler process. Like,
Uh-huh.
I think there's always something that you can learn from teaching what you do to someone else because there are always things that pop up that you're like, I didn't really think about this. And I wouldn't have thought about this unless
Uh-huh.
I was training so and so. It is a daunting task, but I do think there's a lot of benefit to it for sure.
Yeah, and I think that that shadowing, that cross training really makes a couple things easier. And I know that all of us have some things we can say about these next two things, so just dive in. But shadowing so that more of your team knows what everybody's doing and you have at least one level of backup makes staff turnover easier, and it also makes it easier to continue with certain like publications and content and stuff that you have, whether that's social media or newsletters or blogs. So, from a staff turnover perspective, it makes it easier to keep consistency, not only with
Hmm.
messaging and how you're doing stuff, but also that mission and the culture and how things are done at your organization. And then from the um, perspective of like communications, it makes it a little easier to make sure you don't lose the attention of the potential clients that are looking your way or the donors. What else do you guys see in those like two areas?
I think, something that would be important to make a priority is kind of a smooth handoff. I think having something in place for, you said staff turnovers or transitions or things like that would be to have something like a thoughtful exit plan, or a transition plan, even if it's a staff moving to a different position or something like that within the ministry. I think that's essential. Like having a smooth handoff, it's going to help new people step into their roles without confusion, no floundering or minimal floundering at least, um, which comes with disorganized transition. But just having something in place that's going to protect your organization and support the incoming staff person, um, also honor the person who's leaving. I think that's important. And a seamless transition behind the scenes is going to benefit, clients, donors, on the other side of it.
Yeah, and then on the content side of things, I know I touched on that briefly, but is there anything else, Morgan, that you were wanting to say on communications?
Yeah, I just think piggybacking off of staff turnover and the importance of cross training, I think it's so important to just be in conversation with your team members, whether they're leaving, stepping into a new role, your whole team, and people joining your team. It's so important to know like who is doing what, because if you have all these different jobs that are kind of scattered and people are like, oh, I'll take this, I'll take this, I'll take this, but there's no like clear knowledge of like, okay, who actually has social media content, who has blogs. It gets really, really confusing, which could lead to a break in your marketing, losing clients, losing your audience, just because things are not consistent. You're not posting frequently. You're not communicating with your audience frequently. It can cause some issues, and it's really hard to bounce back from that quickly. So I think just piggybacking off of cross training, it's just so important to really have that conversation of being kind of matter of fact of like, so and so has the role of social media, so and so has the role of blogs, and just making sure you know who's really focusing on what, because that could really help you out.
We're going to step away from losing access and losing people to really looking at what happens when you lose your strong messaging, whether that is the focus on what your vision is and what that means for your organization, or just that internal communication that is so important for making sure everybody's on the same page and you're accomplishing the same goals, or even just making sure that at every stage, what you're trying to say to both clients and donors is clear and is pointed in the same direction. So let's dive into that one. I've got my branding co-pilot with me today, Morgan. She and I have done some talks on this, but one of the things that can really mess with marketing and what you're hoping to accomplish is small changes in your messaging or having different messages go out. Like you've changed from one messaging talking point to another, and you haven't fully made that switch over. So I'm talking in kind of vague ways, but Morgan, why don't you jump in here and touch on this one a little bit, just kind of what it looks like when you aren't keeping a consistent messaging and kind of the impact that can have on your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Branding and messaging goes far beyond just logo and the colors you use. Now that is a big part of it, but it goes so far past that to like your tone, what you're saying out there on social media, on your website, on blogs, on everything that's out there to the world. It gets really hard when you have, like Delaney said, different messaging, different types of photos, different logos, different things that don't portray the same thing. And obviously with your donor side and your client side, you're going to have different messaging, but within those separate areas, You have to be consistent. Because lack of consistency, it will kind of, I don't want to say diminish because that's a bold word, but it will lessen your audience's want or need to look at your messaging just because they can read one thing and then the next day it can be a different message and they don't really know who you are or what you're trying to say, and that will cause them to potentially lose interest. Hopefully it doesn't, but
Or
you really want to
trust.
make sure, yeah, you want to make sure that you're consistent across the board with your messaging, your logos. You don't want your social media to have one message and your website to have a different message because they're going to connect to one another. So you want someone, if they're on your social media and they go to your website, they want it to be you want it to be consistent and they know they're in the same or the correct place. So
Yeah, and I will tack on to that in line with making sure that whatever messaging you're choosing for your donors and your clients is consistent. Um, it's also important for that messaging to have to be the same internally as well, so that your team, volunteers, and your paid team members understand what your guys' goals are for different campaigns and how you're going about doing it, what the messaging is. And it might look different. Like, obviously, people on your leadership team might have different access than people who are meeting with your clients, depending on what it is you're exactly like talking about at each level of the campaign. But just have an understanding, like, okay, we're sending these newsletters out right now. It's our year-end appeal. Just making sure everybody's on the same board, on the same page. And also, if there's any kind of messaging that you're really wanting to get out, again, both to clients and then to donors or supporters, making sure they understand what that is so that they can be in alignment, whether that is how you are approaching clients, or certain words you're using to vision cast to supporters. It'll make your whole campaign significantly less confusing, which means that you'll have more clarity when trying to accomplish your goals. This also ties into offline or outdated touch points, things that can really make it difficult for people to follow your campaigns. Cindy, what do you have to say about that one?
I think it's important to, along with what Delaney and Morgan were saying about branding and messaging, things like that, staying consistent and obviously like with the heart of what you're trying to convey to your donors or your clients. But also in like the nitty gritty things. So, what's your voicemail message saying at your center when someone calls, or is in all the information on all of your printed material or digital material consistent with each other? I mean, everything, websites, signage, posts, just all the things, links, making sure everything is up to date so it doesn't cause any confusion. And even down to Delaney, you said something that made me think about this. You've got all these big things that you want to stay consistent across the board, but you also want to focus on like the little things. What's the term you're referring to your your clients? Are they going to be called clients? Are you going to refer to them always as mothers or mamas or whatever? It's so important to even keep those little bits consistent across the board, also. But yeah, I would just say the most consistency you have with keeping things up to date, would it just makes it look like you've got it all together, even if you don't feel like you have it all together. Just making a point of being intentional to keep things yeah, fresh and updated and throw out. I, you know, when I just went through and cleaned up the big storage closet in our organization's admin office, and there was a lot of outdated material. And for a moment, I felt bad because I was like, I need to throw all this out because the links are not good. The QR codes need to be updated. This is old messaging and imagery that we have on here. But I was like, this is a waste because there's like 200 cards left here that we could have done with something. But I kind of had to reframe it in my mind. I was like, this is wasting space more than it's wasting any of the few dollars that I'm going to be throwing away here, because it's more important to our ministry that we have things that are up to date and not all of this outdated stuff floating around. So, yeah, so I would just say across the board, keep things updated, constantly check for outdated things, whether that's digital or print.
I love that. Cindy, I think like it's throughout this entire podcast, every time you share something, I'm like, yes, that's exactly where I was at when I was listening to everyone else speak. And then hearing you talk about even the cards and the material, I think that is so invaluable, because it's just a natural part of the center. And I think, sure, we can look forward and go, okay, how could we order better, or how could we do something? Sure, absolutely. But don't let having outdated material should never take the top of the list, or should never be top priority. And I wouldn't have thought about it that way. So I just love that you brought that up. And it definitely translates over, I mean, seamlessly to your website and to, I think we were kind of even talking about images and things like that, where it's kind of like that same psychology behind it is someone's going to get a business card that is outdated. It transfers over, even with like now we use words like SEO, so like search engine optimization. And I know many of you guys probably either stress about it or work with it and think, okay, how can we want to be seen. We want to be, um, even more than seen, we want to be considered, and for someone to actually make that step forward. And I think that having relevance and having kind of even that change. So obviously with SEO, like if you are changing your material, you're posting your blogs, you're keeping your images up to date, your content is up to date. Take off the old events after they've happened, things like that. I'm excited to hear Morgan's take on even like the images pieces and the content. But honestly, something that I don't think I would have thought about if I hadn't been in a center and then even coming into this work and designing sites is the idea that we are really trying, whether you see a lot of young clients or see more women in their later 30s, and we know that that's going to fluctuate and everyone deals with that. But the idea to me that we are hitting a demographic that is only going to last, maybe it's going to be shifting a lot faster. So the women, maybe you had a website and you had images and material that was really set for, right now, I mean, like even a millennial woman. And in the next 5 to 10 years, I hate to say it because like I'm a millennial, but like it will continue to transition, and then your stuff will seem dated to the young women who are now in their 20s, or they are now maybe in their 30s. And so I just think, I don't know if that I'm getting it across there, but we do serve a fast changing demographic, and making sure that we stay up to date with the way that we are presenting ourselves, but also like right now, I think I'll go to a website and their images are just extremely heavy filtered. Um, and where that was really very popular and what our eyes were used to 5, 10 years ago now is just not the case. And any young woman who's maybe 20 in her 20s will go on there and immediately go, okay, this doesn't seem like what I'm used to seeing, or this isn't for me. And we obviously don't want that to happen. So there really is just such a significance in staying up to date and making sure your content is renewed to be seen for, digitally SEO purposes, but also just for the woman who actually gets to your site to feel like you care enough to be relevant and keep things up to date.
Yeah, I'll touch a little bit. Um, it the demographic changes so fast. It's so true, and I am trying to think. A year ago, social media, especially, the tones that were reaching people were very neutral and calm and just, I mean, neutral is the best way to put it, but now it's turning into more of the, I don't want to say bright and vibrant, but brighter
Mhm.
colors. And those neutral tones aren't even images, like people are looking at the images that are popping and not as much of like the neutral toned images, graphic wise. And so it's really interesting to see, just like you think outdated and you're like, oh, that just means like pictures from 10, 20 years ago. But no, it's a year or two ago. So it's crazy to think that just how fast the demographic does change, and what the audience you're trying to reach, what is resonating with them.
Yeah.
And so pictures especially, it is kind of crazy how fast it changes, but it's so important to stay on top of those trends that are coming in and going out, and making sure that you are staying on top of what you're putting out there.
Yeah, and just so we're all on the same page, when we talk about demographic shifting, we're not exactly talking about your demographic shifting. So you're still, unless there's a huge shift in the, I don't know, the socioeconomic and sexual health practices of people at large, we're still going to be primarily seeing that 18 to 32 age range will be the age demographic you're going to be working with. And you're probably going to see a majority of women. So your gender demographic, you're looking at female. And again, your socioeconomic demographic is probably going to be very similar in terms of maybe they might be more single, or they're not married, or they are have like a lower socioeconomic status. So when we talk about demographic shifting, what we're really talking about is as generations age up. And I know Monet touched on that briefly, talking about millennials versus right now Gen Z is going to be your the people that you're seeing come through. And as even within those generations, as they age up, like as millennials aged up, you saw shifts in what, like, yes, there's some common things for the whole generation, but there are shifts between the older millennials, the middle millennials, and then the younger millennials. And then the same thing's happening with Gen Z, like Morgan touched on. Yet at one point, it was more of like the softer, those like maybe more neutral, that like softer color palette. And now we're starting to see a little bit of a shift where maybe now more of the majority are being pulled in by those like bright, bold pops, or tastefully used as well. Sometimes not so tastefully used, depending on who you are and what your thoughts are on design. What you're doing changes as the people you're targeting age out.
Yeah, I think another thing to mention also is because those things are going to remain fluid with the different changing trends and what's going to reach people most effectively, is to not be so married to whatever you've been doing that you're not willing to change and adjust and refresh and things like that. Because that would be, I feel like that would be to your detriment if you're not willing to kind of explore different imagery or verbiage or things like that, as your audience is kind of changing from one generation to the next.
Guys, do we have any tips for how they can kind of keep up with the change in trends? So Morgan, I know you've looked at the social media. Cindy, I know you've been very involved in design. And Monet, you've been looking at changes on websites. So what are some tips for kind of keeping track of what the latest, I don't mean trends, but like latest, maybe it is trends, like things that are appealing to the audience they're trying to reach?
I would say social media wise, just be aware of what you're seeing online, and either what's catching your eye or seeing what's really trending via social media. I mean, Google is a great way to look up what trends are happening. And I mean, when I am thinking I'm seeing a trend, I always look it up and see, okay, are other people seeing this too? Just to cover my ground of like, are these trends actually happening, or is it just something that I'm trying to convince myself is a new trend? But
Right.
I would say just be aware of what you're seeing online, and what even what your team members are seeing online. Like maybe have them take a week and say, okay, what are two things that you guys are seeing consistently on social media, or even online or on websites? Like what are things that are popping out to you? I think that is really beneficial, because that is in the real world, real time, what is sticking out to you guys?
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was going to say. I was going to say, make sure someone on your team is just chronically online to kind of catch sight of those trends. I always love to look at what other organizations are doing and posting and just I don't know, just out of curiosity and also to see like what trends are they following. And then also big name brands are always going to be using data and analytics and statistics and et cetera, to reach bigger audiences. So even if you're looking at some of those more commercially focused brands for trend cues, it's not a bad idea too, at least with color palettes that are trending or styles or things like that. So just, I guess, eyes open everywhere to kind of catch what's up and coming.
I think also just if you have younger staffers or you have younger volunteers, I think ask the right questions, but then listen and trust what they're saying. Sure, like absolutely. What Morgan was saying was testing it. I think that's a great practice. I think you have the natural eye is maybe in your center right now or in your organization right now. And so just go and ask and trust. And then the last one that's kind of funny, but I've had to do it myself, is kind of maybe a little bit of exposure therapy if it's a little kind of crazy. I think some of the younger generation, what's kind of what Morgan had shared earlier with those bright colors, I've been seeing a lot of that kind of flash media a little bit where you're seeing these videos. It makes sense when you think about where we're at right now, where we're in like the real as an REEL, like culture or, those 10-second videos and they're just constantly changing. Well, that's kind of moving its way into what I am finding on the website, Horizon. And it really did for me. I kind of went in and just started exposing myself quite a bit to those types of websites because at first it was a lot and now you get used to it. You're like, okay, now I see it. I've tested the trend. I know that it's real and it's not just bizarre. So I hope that transferred well, but
Yeah,
That
you're always going to have places like HubSpot and maybe like Adobe and other big names like that that are going to have design trends that come out. So it's always good to kind of like keep an eye out for those. But what Cindy and Morgan and Monet said is right on the money. The best way is to be in it. I feel like the larger the gap gets between your generation and the generation you're trying to reach, the more offensive sometimes it can be to your senses and to your personal sense of taste. So that is why it is really important to pay attention to that youngest member on your team or the younger people in your lives, because you may not like what the design needs to look like to best attract that target demographic. Okay, we are going to go onto something that isn't as colorful as images, but it's very important. So, Monet, to wrap up our section about losing your message, please tell us about personal or tax sensitive data posted
let's
publicly.
talk about the taxes. No, we are something that I have seen, and it's pretty simple, but it's about kind of data masking on your website. This can be a very, very easy thing to do. A lot of times on supporter pages, we will find it where you want to put, hey, this is our tax code and make it as easy as possible for someone to write you a check. We have ways to give, things like that. I'm just going to throw up a big fat red flag. Don't do those types of things. And I think anyone that you're working with to help make your website, if you're working with an external team, I would hope that they are giving you that professional opinion. And if you're doing an awesome job in-house and you have a staff that does your website for you, I would say, hey, let's make sure we carry those practices over as well. And I'm sure that they probably already know about that. But what we have found is when you're not careful, if you skip that simple step of trying to make things easier for your supporter and you just put it online, well, it can be detrimental, plain and simple. I mean, I've seen it where we have poor ministries where they are having fake checks being sent out in their name instead of trying to be cashed. We've had where people are making fake donations large ones, and just to try and gain access. I mean, we live in the world where, we hear they can get your routing number, they can get your account number, just the damage that can happen. And it's just the world we live in. So I think making sure that if you just get the word that data masking and you look it up and you look at all the ways that you can do a better job of making sure, hey, we're accessible. We're making sure that we have, um, our number, they can call us, they can schedule an appointment. You want those things on there. I mean, even just to be for search engine optimization, you want to be able to have those buttons. Absolutely. But you don't want to make yourself vulnerable where you're just blasting all your personal information. It can be a little different when it comes to a nonprofit, because you kind of can't avoid it. But there are bots out there that just go through and run and scan and collect. And we've all received enough spam calls to understand, that. And that's one thing. But when you can be really careful with your personal information when it comes to your center, or your organization, just please and thank you. It's like definitely do not skip that one, because it's for your benefit 110%. And even if you don't totally understand, like, because there's all these different ways, and we could talk about a million different examples of this, but just asking those right questions and going, okay, I've heard this, I just heard that advice. Are we doing that? What is on our website? Reaching out to the people who are helping you, or reaching out to that staff member, just doing a little audit of what you have accessible on your website. That will go a long way, I think. I laid it on thick and quick enough where it was like, hey, it's important. And now we're done talking about tax sensitive data. So back to you, Delaney.
I just want to round it off by once again impressing upon you the importance of another simple checklist. And that is when you think about how you are wanting that client to come to you. So whatever method you're using, like say Google Ads to get their attention, they're coming to your website, or you are putting another contact form or something out into the community, just make sure you are double checking those pathways every now and then. Make sure that if you are bringing them to your website, then your contact information is correct, that your scheduling app is linked up and working properly, that you are getting the emails from those, that your contact forms are updated and the correct link is where you're wanting it to be. So just across the board, however you're giving them, whatever pathways you are making for clients to walk through your doors, really, just make sure every point along the way is updated. Because you could do all this marketing, you could put all this money into ads, and then if you don't have everything updated, you're just throwing money out the window. So this has been our long journey of just little mistakes that can interrupt your marketing in a big way. Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining me for this podcast. And thank you, listener, for sticking with us through it all. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to us at support@extendwebservices.com. We'd love to talk with you about maybe little marketing mistakes that are causing issues. If you have marketing questions, we have a great blog at extendwebservices.com underneath free marketing resources. And we always look forward to hearing from you about things you'd like us to talk about. Have a wonderful day.